Right, I'm just going to give about another 2 minutes and see if other colleagues arrive. Yeah, as they are doing now. So, because meetings here overlap and people have to come from the other side of the building. So we'll just give people a couple of more minutes before we start. Okay, I think it's now after 4:05, so I think we can start this this meeting. Thank you very much for attending this afternoon. We very much appreciate you making time to come and share concerns and maybe share things you support about the Tobacco Products Directive. We've had a meeting this lunchtime with representatives of the tobacco industry, and I'll say to you what I said to them. I'm not here to be asked, why is this in the Commission proposal, why is this there, because that's the Commission's proposal. And we are the Parliament, and we are this afternoon taking evidence from you about the Commission proposal. So I can't answer questions about why the Commission proposed this or that. That's not my remit. If you have specific questions or queries, then I will ask the Commission those in committee on Thursday, and I'm sure colleagues will hear as well. So it's your chance here to tell us what you think about the Tobacco Products Directive and concerns you have about it. And what I was proposing was that we just, given we're doing one topic here, the whole issue of the nicotine products, and mainly e-cigarettes issues, we simply just give the floor to each organisation who's present here for 3 minutes. And I think you've been told that in advance by the Secretary of the committee. So you have here two of my colleagues who are shadow rapporteurs from the European Parliament's Environment Committee. So they will be inputting as well into the debate, and there are some assistance of other colleagues and representatives from the political groups of the Parliament in the room here. These meetings are being recorded, and an audio tape will be placed on the public record of the meetings. But there are no journalists here. There was one who tried to be here, but is no longer here at the moment. So it's not a public meeting in that sense. We've had a public meeting on the Tobacco Products Directive, and of course our committee's meetings are public as well. So, Parliament, I'm the rapporteur. I'm taking evidence. I'm going to draft my report by the end of this month, and so I'm ready to listen to you. So I don't know who wants to go first. And maybe when you go, maybe I'll just start with here, ESITA. We'll start with ESITA. If you explain, because you've got lots of acronyms here, exactly who you are, who you represent, and so my colleagues are clear. Thank you. You do need to use a microphone. You just Press the button. Yeah, thank you.
Right, you got me? Okay. My name is Catherine Devlin from ISCETA, the Electronic Cigarette Industry Trade Association. We represent members in the EU. We are specifically formulated to help with regulating from within the industry, supporting local government enforcement agents in each of the territories. Guernsey has adopted our programme as their way of regulating these products. And Hungary has invited us to come and discuss with them the possibility of rolling it out for Hungary and surrounding member states. Our position is that medicines regulation would not be an appropriate reclassification for these products. They're consumer products rather than being medicines, and that is where their appeal lies. They are a like-for-like replacement for tobacco smoking, and making them a medicine would actually we would lose the public health benefits. That's actually what the tobacco industry seems to sort of want for them, is that they're reclassified as medicines, which puts everybody back onto smoking. We do understand absolutely that the Tobacco Products Directive needs revising. We would like very much to assist as far as we're able to with Parliament's attempts to get it through in this Parliament. We don't want to be in the way of that. You know, we really want to help you kind of get it through. But we can't accept the destruction of our industry as a sort of side effect of that process. We would like to offer a suggestion on how it might be possible to remove any sort of potential for challenges. Either electronic cigarettes would be taken out of the Tobacco Products Directive, since we've already had it acknowledged by the Commission that they're not tobacco products, and leave them under the General Product Safety Directive and related regulatory statutory instruments where they are now. Or raise the level that's proposed from 0.4% to 5% weight by volume. We would need also some clarity on this level so that it's actually enforceable, because notions of plasma level, it's not enforceable on the ground. You're not going to get consumers and say, well, you just take some of your blood and measure the plasma levels. So if we just said straightforward 5% weight by volume, anything under that level would be left as the GPSD. Anything above that level would be reclassified as medicinal. Thank you very much for inviting us and for considering our position.
And thank you for keeping to your time. It's very commendable. Okay, e-lights.
Catherine set the bar quite high. I must keep to 3 minutes. My name is Charlie Hamshaw Thomas. I'm the Corporate Affairs Director for Zandera, a UK-based company, owners of the e-lights brand. We believe that our product is a breakthrough and potentially transforming product. Our goal is for e-lights to be a brand that is global and is made available wherever cigarettes are sold or consumed. The product has been designed, manufactured, marketed and sold as a consumer product, an alternative to cigarettes. It's proving enormously popular with consumers. It's being widely recognised by a growing number of very eminent public health experts as being safer than cigarettes. We have never, ever intended the product to be a medicine. That has never, ever been part of the plan. So we're surprised by the proposal. Obviously, we're pleased to see that it's not treated as a tobacco product. Patently, it is not a tobacco product. There is no tobacco anywhere near our products. We have, by the way, I should have said, we have absolutely no association with any tobacco company at all. The medicinal classification will have, or reclassification would have the perverse effect of removing from the market the whole panoply of products that are proving very, very popular and, as I say, are being widely recognised as safer. There are a growing number of court decisions that are actually showing that attempts to classify as medicine have failed. There's 4 points I want to make. Regulation, we are absolutely adamant that there's got to be regulation. It's a consumer product. We've got to have minimum product quality and safety standards, so we're fully supportive of that. I think Catherine is being a bit modest about the work that ISCETA have done. The ISE is a fantastic start point for a framework of regulation. The fact that Hungary are looking at it, the fact that it has been formally adopted in a jurisdiction, albeit not a member of the European Union, says it all. So I would urge you to help us further improve that. There are economic consequences. This is a very flourishing industry in the UK, worth now, we reckon, of the order of £40 million. due to grow to 100 million within the next year. I look forward to hearing from my colleagues from other countries the size of these markets. That obviously means jobs, it means tax revenues, it means a lot. The other point to make, which I think is very important, if e-cigs do prove to be an aid for people stopping and reducing smoking, you have got a self-funding smoking cigarettes cessation programme. I will repeat that, a self-funding cigarette smoking cessation programme. That must be worth looking at. The consumer consequences are enormous. In Germany, I believe there are already 2 million regular users. In the UK, there are over 700,000. This proposal would deny those consumers access to a product recognised as safer. We also believe that it would have the effect of putting all these products back on the shelves. In the UK, that's over 500 million cigarettes back into consumers' hands. And final point, shared objectives. We want to work with you, like all of the other regulators around the world, to agree how these products are regulated. Thank you very much. Apologies for being over.
No, you're fine. You're very well on time. Thank you. Is it Essig Bond?
Yes.
Yeah, you have to explain your...
No problem. My name is Raoul Frezo. I'm a physician and also chairman of the e-cig Bond. That's the Dutch Association of the Electronic Cigarette Industry. And I hope you don't mind that my English is not as good as my neighbors. Yes. Although I only have 3 minutes, I will reduce my key issues I wanted to discuss with you back to two. The first one I would like to discuss is what is the health risk of the electronic cigarette in relation to the health risk of a traditional cigarette. When you look at all the different points, for instance the pharmacodynamics of nicotine, it's particularly relevant that there is a dose-response relationship in nicotine use. And also there's a development of tolerance by exposure to nicotine. The toxicology of an electronic cigarette is not more than a traditional cigarette. Also, absorption of nicotine through the buccal mucosa is relatively slow and does not provide fast or high nicotine plasma levels comparable to cigarette smoking. It's about 1/3 of that. And problems with traditional cigarette smokers can be extrapolated to e-cigarettes, although I believe they would be less. When looking at pharmacokinetics of an electronic cigarette, whether you have deep inhalation or shallow inhalation, it results in a similar absorption of the nicotine. So it doesn't matter how you inhale it. And the most frequent complaints with using an electronic cigarette are coughing and irritation in mouth and throat, just the same as traditional cigarettes. In conclusion, the risk of nicotine intake by using an electronic cigarette should be weighed against the hazards of continued smoking. With that in mind, the electronic cigarette is at least not more hazardous than traditional cigarettes, and probably much less. Then, why is classification as a medicine not possible for all e-cigarettes containing more than the maximum proposed dosages? Well, you see, it's not the European Parliament that decides what is a medicine and what is not. You already made a law that makes a definition of a medicine. So we have to look at that definition to say if an electronic cigarette is a medicine or not. In my country, we already had that discussion with our government. And the government stating it was a medicine lost. So now it's a consumer product, like my neighbors advertise, and it's freely available, also for kids. And that's not a good thing. So I would like to see that the electronic cigarette is regulated in a proper manner. I'm a doctor, I told you in the beginning, and that's my goal, and that's my reason why I'm the chairman of the association in my country. I would like to see that the electronic cigarette is regulated in a proper way, and the way you do it in the current proposal of the Tobacco Products Directive, it's not the good one, because you will lose in lawsuits when you keep this the way it is now. We already experienced that in our country, unfortunately. So please make it a tobacco product. Thank you.
Okay, and then is it Geta? Yeah.
Microphone. Okay. We're coming from Greece. We are the trade association of Greek companies. We are 3 here, but most of our time we want to dedicate to a doctor that we have together that will give you all the scientific data about the electronic cigarette. Just what I want to make sure is that we get 2 things right. One is that an electronic cigarette is an alternative smoking product, which is a pleasure product and has nothing to do with medicines. That is something that we have to make it clear. The second thing that I want to make clear is that the proposed dosage of nicotine that you propose is actually an effect and a de facto ban of electronic cigarettes. Why is that? Because only 8% of our customers use the electronic cigarette as you propose. Therefore, 92% of current electronic cigarette users are going to go back to smoking traditional cigarettes because there's no other alternative for them. Who from the committee is going to take that ethical blame? That is my question to the committee. And I will give my turn to Dr. Fasalinos to give you the scientific data.
Hello, my name is Konstantinos Fasalinos. I'm a physician and researcher at work as a research fellow at Onassis Cardiac Surgery Center in Greece and as a clinical observer and researcher at the University of Leuven here in Belgium since yesterday. I want to make clear, and you can see in my presentation on the last page, conflict of interest, that I do not represent the Greek E-Cigarette Association, Trading Association. I was invited by them. I have not received any payment or even a travel grant from them to participate in this discussion, because I was here since I work in Leuven, 28 kilometers from Brussels. So, we all know, as you can see on page 2, the proposal for the new tobacco directive by the European Commission. We all know that. Let's go to page 3, where the European Union itself has defined what is a medicinal product. According to their definition, it is a product that is used to treat or prevent disease, or that has any physiologic, pharmacologic, immunologic or metabolic actions to the human. According to this definition, probably we cannot define nicotine as a medicinal product because it has no metabolic, pharmacologic or immunologic action to the smoker. It is just used in subsequently lower doses to desensitize the human organism from its effects. So it has no other effects on the human. We all know that the efficacy of the NRTs from large meta-analysis and randomized studies is very low. It is less than 7%. And even for other pharmacologic interventions like drugs that are taken orally, the most current representative and the most successful one is varenicline, the total long-term success in smoking cessation is less than 20%. And this is where the electronic cigarette comes to be used by the 80% of smokers that are unable to quit by current medically approved means. Now, the electronic cigarette has the potential to be successful because they deliver pleasure to the smoker, part of the pleasure of the cigarette, but without any of the toxic substances present in tobacco. And believe me, nicotine is not a toxic substance when used in a way in an electronic cigarette. And I will give you clinical data for this later. The electronic cigarettes are unique because they deal with both the chemical addiction through the delivery of nicotine and the behavioral addiction, which is the whole ritual of smoking, like holding the electronic cigarette, the hand-to-mouth movement, and the visible vapor that is exhaled. The addictive potential of electronic cigarettes has never been proved. There is no study or even a single case report in the literature saying that someone got addicted from using the electronic cigarette. Of course, smokers are already addicted to nicotine, so the electronic cigarette does not give any further addiction to that. Also, lately, a study published last month showed that it does not appeal to the young people, not at all compared to the tobacco cigarette. And finally, both the industry, but most importantly scientists, have made clear that the electronic cigarettes are marketed for the smokers only. Yeah, I will use the time from my two previous speakers. So, first, a clinical study that has measured nicotine levels from the electronic cigarette use has found that the nicotine levels do not elevate even when using an 18 milligram nicotine concentration liquid. You can see on page 6 the diagrams indicating the levels of nicotine from a tobacco cigarette and from the electronic cigarette. No elevation at all. The same happens with the blood pressure and the heart rate, which are the major determinants of nicotine activity. One of my studies that was published and was presented in a press conference held by the European Society of Cardiology last year also proved the same thing. A very small elevation in diastolic blood pressure, no elevation in heart rate or systolic blood pressure. Now, we have performed a clinical study including personal interviews of 101 electronic cigarette users. All users have completely substituted smoking with electronic cigarettes, and they were using the electronic cigarettes for 7.7 months. You can see on page 8
sorry, it was 3 minutes per organisation. You've spoken for 5.5 minutes now. So if you could, we have the slides.
The problem, what I want
so you have to wind up now.
My fellows from Greece have given their time to me to discuss more about the scientific matters. If you are not allowing me to do this, I have nothing more to do than to comply with your request. But I'm using their time. That's why they didn't speak almost at all. He spoke only 1 minute and the other.
We have to give time to the doctors. That is what I believe.
And I think scientific evidence is the most important.
There are many doctors we can invite here.
Okay, I will use 2 minutes more.
Doctors that have studied the electronic cigarette, I don't know of much. So there's a couple in the world, so use one of them.
We did say each organisation 3 minutes. The others have had 3 minutes.
That is correct. But for instance,
we're going to move on now. You can conclude your point.
Can I use 1.5 minutes?
You can just have a minute. Finish in a minute, please.
Okay. All users that have substituted nicotine smoking with electronic cigarette used 59% 18 milligrams nicotine concentration, 21% 24 milligrams, and no one used 4 milligrams as 4 milligrams nicotine concentration in order to stop smoking. Also, even after 7.7 months of regular use of electronic cigarette, only 9% use 4 milligrams nicotine concentration liquids or less. In our clinical study, out of 101 patients, only 6 reported some palpitations that could be attributed to nicotine. No one needed to seek medical advice or had any short-term or long-term health problems. So the levels of nicotine reaching even to 24 milligrams per ml concentration were safe, effective, and they led to the complete substitution of cigarette smoking with electronic cigarette. And finally, our last study, consisting of 35 experienced electronic cigarette users, we measured the consumption of liquid that during a 5-minute use of the electronic cigarette, which is the time needed to smoke 1 cigarette, and during a 20-minute use of the electronic cigarette, which is the time needed for a nicotine inhaler to release 4 milligrams of nicotine. We have found that during a 5-minute study, the consumption of liquid led to a total nicotine content of 0.48 milligrams of nicotine released from the liquid, which is less than half than the amount released from 1 tobacco cigarette. And the average liquid concentration in 20 minutes, which is the time needed to deliver 4 milligrams from a nicotine inhaler, was 1.63 milligrams of nicotine. Again, less than half compared to the nicotine inhaler. Finally, I'll conclude by saying that the proposal to ban liquids with higher than 4 milligrams per ml nicotine concentration is virtually a complete ban to the product. Such low concentrations are not used in reality and are insufficient for the ultimate goal, which is the complete substitution of smoking with electronic cigarettes. And if implemented, they will force most of the people that have substituted smoking with electronic cigarettes to smoking relapse.
Okay,
thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, and it is 3 minutes per organisation. So the others
Yeah.
And as I said, you invited an expert here. We did specifically ask that people didn't bring experts, because we can have experts and with different views, and that's what this is about. There's not one expert, there are many experts. So, Mr. Enjoy Company, yeah. Enjoy, yes, I see.
Thank you very much. My name is Jeff Weiss, and I'm here on behalf of Enjoy. Enjoy is an electronic cigarette company, currently the market leader in the U.S., and we also have a UK subsidiary, Enjoy Innovations Limited. I think there's a lot of newness about this category, electronic cigarettes, on the one hand, and on the other hand, these are products that have been on the market worldwide since about 2005. Some of my colleagues have talked about the popularity of electronic cigarettes in Germany and in the UK. In the US, there are about 3 million users. And I think a lot of the concerns that are raised about electronic cigarettes are concerns that were raised at the beginning of the industry. Will these be attractive to adolescents? Will this lead non-smokers to want to use them? Will this become a gateway product that someone who doesn't currently smoke a tobacco cigarette becomes attracted to this and then moves on to a real tobacco cigarette? And what we've seen over 8 years that the products have been used is that none of those things have come to pass. These products are marketed by essentially all responsible companies to adult committed smokers, and that's certainly been our practice. We age verify all of our sales. And what we've seen is that, and I think Professor Etter of the University of Geneva has reported, there's not been a single documented case of an adolescent becoming addicted to electronic cigarettes. We are not seeing non-smokers try these products in any meaningful numbers, and we're certainly not seeing anybody who's a non-smoker become addicted, and we're not seeing any evidence that anyone has used this as a gateway to the consumption of tobacco products. And so we believe that the regulatory pathway that's appropriate is one that ensures appropriate standards of manufacture, quality control, things of that sort, but not one that forces us down a medicinal pathway that may lead to products being pulled from the market and may force smokers back to what we all know is a toxic product. The TPD proposal correctly, in significant part, of course, puts the focus on the harm caused by tobacco cigarettes, which claim 700,000 lives in the EU every year. But electronic cigarettes are part of the solution. They're not part of that problem. These products don't contain tobacco, and none of us are affiliated with tobacco companies in any way. We at Enjoy like to say that our mission is to obsolete cigarettes, and we believe that this is a goal that is achievable within the next decade. And I think that's a goal that we can all share. And I think in a larger sense, that's the goal of the TPD too, to end this public health scourge of tobacco cigarettes. Thank you very much.
And Teveka.
It's the TVCA. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're a Tobacco Vapor Electronic Cigarette Association called the TVCA. We're a non-profit. Is it working now? I may have a bad microphone. Oh, I'm sorry about that. There we go. Perfect. Now we restart the clock. I got an extra 22 seconds. Anyway, as I was saying, we're the Tobacco Vapor Electronic Cigarette Association, a private or a non-profit association of private sector companies. My colleagues here have spoken about the e-cigarette and the fact that it's not a medicinal product. Obviously, I can go into that and it'd be a lengthy discussion, but everything they said is basically correct. We at the TVCA, however, have a few other issues with that. The e-cigarettes are not presented as a smoking cessation aid, contrary to the nicotine replacement therapies, NRTs. As stated by the Court of Justice in the EU in the Commission versus Germany with regard to the presentation of the criterion, a product is presented for treating or preventing a disease within the meaning of Directive 2001/83 when it expressly indicates or recommends as such possible by means of labels, leaflets, or oral representations. We are not putting the e-cigarette in that category either. E-cigarettes do not have any physiological effect on the human being, as was discussed earlier as well. The Court of Justice has ruled that the product must have a significant effect on the metabolism and only then may it be classified as a product capable of restoring, correcting, or modifying physiological function within that meaning. The Court of Justice of the European Union rejects a broad interpretation of the term medicinal product by function, as the Court recognizes that such an interpretation would have significant adverse effect on the free movement of goods within the EU. Indeed, a broad interpretation of the term medicinal product by function would then lead to a paradoxical finding, as products such as alcoholic drinks, energy drinks, coffee, tea, and indeed conventional cigarettes would qualify as medicinal products by function. Thus, as the e-cigarette cannot be defined as a medicinal product, the Commission currently proposal would lead to a de facto ban on e-cigarettes across the EU. It's added here that the courts in the Netherlands, Germany, and most recently Estonia, as well as in the US, have all ruled that e-cigarettes cannot be classified as a medicinal product. This is due essentially to the reasoning provided above. Moreover, this is set to remain unchanged in the future, as there is absolutely no reason or movement at EU level to amend the definition of medicinal products under the directive, nor is there any justification to do so. For the reasons set out above, the TVCA is the opinion that the most appropriate way forward, which will be both ensure high level of public health and attainment of the EU's internal market harmonization objective, is to put the e-cigarette under the umbrella of tobacco products within the future directive. Taking into account the specific characteristics of e-cigarettes, it follows that the following two amendments should be brought to the draft directive. A, the definition of a tobacco product should be amended as followed. Any product made or derived from tobacco, which is genetically modified or not, that's intended for human consumption. This definition is almost identical to the one currently proposed and reflects the U.S. Tobacco Act definition. Any product made or derived from tobacco that is intended for human consumption. This definition was slightly broader than the currently proposed one insofar as it would include products derived from tobacco. This amendment would bring e-cigarettes within the scope of the definition of tobacco products, since e-cigarettes contain nicotine derived from tobacco leaves. This means that subjects to the reservation made under e-cigarettes may also be subject to health warnings, which is similar to that required under the proposed directive for NCP. That's it.
Excuse me. My organization had been shown here. It's VDEH, the German Vendors Association, and I was invited as chairman of it, and possibly I may speak too.
Yes, you
my
can
time
speak.
is running.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you. Okay.
I want to make sure
so
you
you
have
got
time
me.
to discuss. That's all.
First, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. Given the short time, I would get you straight to the point. The Commission is currently waiving the biggest opportunity in the stagnating tobacco control efforts, but at the same time, they are setting cluelessly on methods such as plain packaging. Their chances of success are virtually unproven, and at least at the example of Finland, they may be strongly challenged. As the FCTC was invented, there were no e-cigarettes. It was intended to tobacco control with all its health risks, but not especially to nicotine. But times and circumstances change. If needed, the provisions of the FCTC are to be adopted, but not the modern possibilities and facts. In the discussion so far, it has been neglected to take views on the benefits whose over the years were confirmed by independent institutes. Hardly addiction risks made by universities in Munich and Dordogne in 2012. Hardly health risks. ESC Munich 2012. Virtually no air pollution or passive smoking in the Fraunhofer Institute Brunswick 2012. In fact, there is no reason to fight the e-cigarette, especially not in the name of health. And the all-in-all positive studies are increasing fast. The pressure to the e-cigarette opponents is growing. Even the so-called Japan study, where the e-cigarette had been massively overheated to cause decomposition products, is positive. It shows that it's impossible for the consumer to do so without big technical complexity. Today I'm not talking about the proposed limits of nicotine. For an easy fix, they are too far outside of the sensible range of 18 to 24 milligrams per milliliter. Here, a deeper review of the TPD is required. Then also including a delivery ban to minors, which has to be included. And that's the thing we in Germany do since years now by ourselves, without any help, without anything. We did. No one helped us. Also, the child-proof breaches. As an adult and responsible citizen of the EU, I have the right to decide how I want to shape my life, if I may purchase and use the e-cigarette. And this right I claim on behalf of the well over 7 million and fast-growing EU citizens who use this product already with satisfaction and without problems. Finally, I think the inclusion of the e-cigarette in the TPD is illegal. This is occupied by a German expert opinion, which I will present the ENVIT participants, if interested, following along with the other results I mentioned here above. But that should not be part of the following discussion. And the Commission should have the opportunity to check my states before. And thank you. A little too long.
Okay, thank you. I think we've had all the industry contributions now, and we're going to hand over to questions to colleagues. My first comment is that there seems to be a difference of opinion on some things between you, because I'm hearing some people saying, why is it in the Tobacco Products Directive, it's not tobacco? But then we have others saying, welcoming the fact that it's in tobacco. Now, my understanding is that nicotine primarily comes from tobacco. 90-something% of nicotine comes from tobacco. You can get it from aubergines if you eat vast quantities of them. So, essentially, it is really a... and I think in the US, I think the industry in the US is lobbying the US government to regulate it as a tobacco product. I'm also surprised you say you're shocked that the Commission's come out with an idea about medicine regulation, because I don't know why you're so shocked, because in half the member states it's already a medicine regulation. I know there's been some court cases and the Netherlands has changed, I know that, but we can't sit here and pretend we're shocked. We're shocked at this because that's what's been happening in many countries. The United States, I know, did in fact have a medicine regulatory framework, and that's what's being discussed now in the United States.
A lot of people are doing the same mistake.
No,
that is what you're saying.
I'm just saying.
But, well, just
I'm
take
just
it
saying
off.
that we should have a discussion based. You can't have been so shocked, because that's what has been happening, and that's what the debate's about. Whether that's the right path is a discussion, not that it's a shocking path that the Commission alone has taken, as if it's the only organisation in Europe that has dragged this up out of nowhere.
No, the shocking part.
No, sir, we're giving the floor to people. We are speaking now. You've had your talk. We're going to bring you back. So the other point I'd make is regulate about this. Now, we had one doctor here, but there are other doctors. Now, some doctors have mixed views on this. We know this. I've listened to different doctors. Some think e-cigarettes can help to be a quit. Some think they can't help, that they don't help smokers. Some think it's bringing the habit in. But even those who do think it's a useful tool are saying that there are problems with e-cigarettes. And I'd like your comments on this, that they did some trials and found that 30% of the products didn't actually have the nicotine content they said they did. That they weren't accurately labelled, that they found high degrees of toxicants and drugs inside some of the products. So there have been problems with regulation, which I think many of you have recognised, and some of you want actually to have a better regulatory framework for your products, because you're not satisfied with the issues at the moment. We're talking about medicines regulation as if it's only one thing, as if a medicines regulatory framework means it's hard to get hold of, you can't get it, and it's a huge process. But speaking to regulators of medicines, there are many different ways. There are some medicines which have recognised efficacy, paracetamol, other products. In some countries, over-the-counter medicines are advertised on television. They're sold in all kinds of different shops. They're not exclusively sold in pharmacies. And I've heard that some companies have, we'll bring you the floor. These are my questions. So I wonder if, because people are saying if you go for medicines, it is the end of our industry. But it's not the end of many, many industries in Europe who sell over-the-counter medicines very successfully. They go for regulation, they sell generic medicines. So there's different... Medicine doesn't mean 10 years of clinical trials in that way. So I wondered, have you seriously looked at the medicine option? I know you're lobbying against it today, but but some companies have applied for licenses, I understand, in some countries as well. So those are my points. My colleagues here, I'm going to take all the colleagues together. Martin Callanan, who's the shadow for the ECR group.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you to all of our panel. A lot of food for thought, and we've all received lots of information, particularly from users who've been very actively writing to us, and personally I have a lot of sympathy for your case. One of my questions was, as Linda says, how difficult is it to get medical devices authorisation? All the nicotine replacement therapy patches, etc., presumably have it. The evidence that I've seen seems to indicate that this is a useful smoking cessation device, and so I have some sympathy for your case about whether it should be included in the Tobacco Product Directive or not. I'm not sure. I think the key argument for me is there any evidence of new users taking up electronic cigarettes as opposed to traditional tobacco smoking? If, as a smoking cessation device, I think there was a lot of evidence that electronic cigarettes can be useful, but to me it's the same argument really as for snus. I can see that there could be some uses in smoking cessation, but is there any evidence of new users taking up either electronic cigarettes instead of traditional tobacco smoking?
I want to ask my colleagues, do they have any... on the same note, flavourings of e-cigarettes, marketing of flavoured e-cigarettes, we've seen them quite widely marketed, if you know about gateway, because there is a concern about gateway to smoking. Why do you have strawberry and chocolate flavoured e-cigarettes? That's my question to you. And strawberry and raspberry and all these other ones. We've seen them in Strasbourg, so we know they're on the market because we had a look at them. So that's my question to you, if they're not gateway. No, we will. We will. So, we promise you. I'm just checking my colleagues have any questions for you. No, Robert Goebbels, who's the rapporteur in ITRE committee.
Yeah, Linda, thank you. I have a very naive question because as I never smoked in my life, I didn't touch electronic cigarettes either. Are those things expensive or not?
Okay, we can ask about price. I'm sure people here. How they compare with cigarettes, I suppose, is the question. Mrs. Rees wants to ask a question. Who is the shadow of the Liberal group in the Environment Committee?
Thank you, Mrs. Chairman. I think the speaker of the Enjoy Association or company was right. The word here is newness. When we talked about all this 10 years ago, it didn't exist, so this is brand new. Of course, in the proposal, when we first started, when we first got the proposal from the Commission, I gathered, and we were in between shadows thinking that the issue of packaging was going to take the lead, the controversy. Well, we realize now that e-cigarettes are the key point of controversy, doubts, questions, and things like that. I kind of globally agree with the proposal as such from the Commission. It needs fine-tuning, and we will of course do and see where we disagree. Now, concerning e-cigarettes, I have doubts, and concerning the proposal of the Commission, I would like to reiterate the question and the critics that come from, as you say, other doctors, because they usually mention the issue of quality control. Some of them say there is no quality control, thus there is no quality insurance, because they only go under the regime for the time being of general product safety, which is not sufficient. And they also say there's no, how do you call that in English, measures of dosage, do you say ça? Pas d'évaluation des dosages, measures of dosage. You can never be sure. I'm mentioning the critics as they come, so I reiterate the questions here. Coming to my doubts, because I've been, as all of us, interpellé, whatever you say in English, by many citizens, not only associations, but citizens as such, concerning the threshold, the 4 milliliters threshold that has been taken by the Commission and proposed by the Commission. Many of them say it is not at all coherent with the reality of what we live and how we smoke and what we need. It does not correspond to anything. So what do you think of this? And what would be acceptable, what would be viable for you? What sort of, well, I've heard that the threshold of 5 milligrams has been mentioned. And then the key issue that Martin mentioned, of course, the question of outil de sevrage, smoking cessation tool, because this is really the key issue. We don't want to install it as a first, the e-cigarette. So I don't know if banning them for minors would be some sort of thing we could envisage and be sure of it. I remember during our first hearing, I put the question to the representative of the industry. At the time, it was Mr. Rehring, I think, from whatever company or he was, and he never answered. How can we be sure? We all hear that of course, the industry is never going to use young people as a target, aim at them. How can we be sure of that? I mean, how can we? And I've been told, I don't know, I haven't checked, that on the internet you can already find some sort of e-cigarettes that light up. There must be some sort of an iPhone application, which means all my friends, Facebook friends are going to, well, it lights up. I don't know. I haven't checked. I don't smoke either. But I can imagine anything. It's also innovation. So how can we be sure of that if we don't sort of be coercitive? How do you say that? Binding on the issue.
Okay, so we've had questions and comments. I'm just going to take them in reverse order, maybe, with the organisations, if that's okay. We'll just go down and you can respond. We have about 10 minutes left, so starting with TV ECA.
Yeah, I appreciate all the comments. Obviously, I have a few issues with that. I'm very familiar with the case in the United States, as well as I am familiar with the case in Europe. I wanted to answer some of the questions. E-cigarettes are actually less expensive. There is absolutely no evidence that any young smoker starts smoking e-cigarettes prior to actually using conventional cigarettes. As far as the flavoring in e-cigarettes, menthol in conventional cigarettes is a flavoring as well, so it depends on how you actually look at flavors. But we feel that, again, flavors are not a gateway to this particular product. We do feel, and I've seen this on several occasions, that when you're trying to get a particular product changed from the drug into a category of, as it is now by default, a consumer product in the Netherlands and a tobacco product in the U.S., as I was personally involved in all that, the issue is that everybody seems to want to stop it. But once the definition is changed, you can no longer get them on the phone. Age verification, packaging, safety standards, all these things we worked on very hard and very long, but yet now having to go through this process with the directive, again trying to put this particular product in a medicine category when all the courts, the Netherlands, the US, Germany, Estonia just recently, have clearly stated that this product cannot be put in the medicine category due to the fact that it lacks in all the things that the definition of a drug states it is. And that's our opinion on that.
Sure, please, thank you. To respond to some of the questions that I heard, the concerns that you raised regarding consistency of dosage, quality control, presence of impurities, we think those are... Oh, I'm sorry about that. The concerns you raised about consistency of dosage, presence of impurities, those kinds of things, we think those are all valid concerns, and we think that a midway regulatory pathway will be sufficient to address those. Our company only sells traditional and menthol flavors, and that's another potentially appropriate method of regulation. Certainly, banning of sales to minors would be an appropriate form of regulation. In the U.S., it's a mid-pathway. It's not full medicinal regulation, but there is regulation, or at least there's going to be forthcoming regulation within the next few months, and we think that's appropriate. So we want to see quality control and consistency. We want to avoid these harms, but to date we've seen no evidence that, in fact, the public is being harmed by these products. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand. Well, I'm meeting the FDA, actually, to talk to them, that the regulatory states in the US is not settled yet. It's desettled. There's been some different views, like ours. They're having a discussion in Congress about the whole issue, as we are having here. So one speaker from GECTA, please.
I would like to answer to Mr. Callahan. if I see right. Yeah. There is not even a single case report of any non-smoker getting addicted to electronic cigarettes. Second of all, there are several published studies that have shown that they do not appeal to the adolescents. More than 95% of adolescents that have used the electronic cigarette are smokers, are current smokers. And there are several reasons for this. I don't want to go any further on that. Yeah, 5% is a very low number, and even those that have, and I told you that have tried the electronic cigarette, they are not users of the electronic cigarette. As I have said, there is not a single report of anyone that has started the electronic cigarette without being a smoker before. Another thing, we are discussing about the nicotine levels in electronic cigarettes while we are lying to the people about the nicotine level in the tobacco cigarettes. The new proposal of the Tobacco Directive still accepts the ISO method of defining nicotine to tobacco cigarettes. We know from studies made 15 years ago that the ISO method underestimates by more than twofold the amount of nicotine and other carcinogenic substances that are uptaken by the user. So I think this is a basic mistake of the new tobacco directive, that they still accept the ISO method. One tobacco cigarette has approximately 10 milligrams of nicotine. The 1 milligram that is that you can read in the packaging comes from the ISO method of using a tobacco cigarette, which is completely unrealistic compared to how a smoker uses it. Also, if I'm a smoker and I use 0.5 milligram cigarette, if I by mistake buy a 1 milligram nicotine containing cigarette, I will not become poisoned. The same happens with the labeling that you correctly referred, that there is some mistakes in the labeling of the nicotine. These mistakes in the labeling have been in the field of around 10% difference compared to the real value. We have to make clear that every user, either a smoker or an electronic cigarette user, self-regulates the amount of nicotine he obtains by the need he has for nicotine. So even if he takes the wrong liquid or with a mistyped label, he will not overuse the product and he will not get any poison. And there is no report, even from the FDA, who is watching the electronic cigarette use. They have not reported any poisoning from regular use of the electronic cigarette. They have released the report of 2012. There is no poisoning case from electronic cigarettes. You also mentioned that scientists have different opinions. I have to assure you that no scientist who has been involved in research in electronic cigarettes have ever said that electronic cigarettes are equal or more harmful compared to tobacco cigarettes. This is, and also for the data that I have presented, these are complete novel studies that have never been presented before concerning the consumption of liquid and the amount of nicotine that is produced by this consumption, and I'm sure that everyone will replicate that kind of data, because we used very experienced users, not novice users, because novice users use the electronic cigarette device less intensively. And with this, I conclude my comment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, let me just correct something you said. I didn't say that there were scientists who were saying that e-cigarettes were as harmful as cigarettes. I didn't say that. I just said there were doctors who have different views about how e-cigarettes should be regulated. That's what I said. Which is because there is a big public debate about this. That's what I wanted, to have an honest public debate, because they're discussing it in many different jurisdictions at the moment. That's what I was saying. You're one doctor, there are other doctors with different views. Yeah, okay. Like everybody else, doctors, like everyone else, has different views. So there isn't one consensus in the medical community on this issue. That's the point I was trying to make. Yes.
Yes,
E-cig bond.
Yes, that's correct. Well, the first you mentioned, and I heard you, sir, also asking that, is why is it so difficult for the industry to accept that you can register it as a medicine? Well, I can explain that. There are undoubtedly large companies that won't have problems registering an e-cigarette as a medicine. But there are also small companies and foreign companies that do have problems because they simply don't have the money and the means to register. And they will go to court. And as I stated before, in my country, I've seen what happens when you go to court when saying that this is a medicine. You will not stand for that. You will lose that statement because the medicine law, the directive from the European Union, makes it impossible for an electronic cigarette to be definite as a medicine. So, in the end, it will by default become a consumer product. And then you have the same problems, I have the same problems you all mentioned. There is no age check. There is not a proper regulation and legislation about labels, about dosage. And when you put it in the tobacco directive as a tobacco product, you can sell it like a tobacco product to adults and not to children. So if you keep the tobacco directive the way it is now and stating that everything above a certain dosage becomes a medicine, it will go to court eventually and you will lose it. I'm absolutely sure about it. And then we lose the chance to regulate it in a proper way. So in the tobacco directive, I don't read anything about age verification. That's the chance you need to take. I don't read anything about proper labeling. I don't read anything about good quality. And that's what concerns me, because here are all the companies that do the right job. We take care of age verification, and we take care of good labeling, and we take care of quality control, but we are not the problem. The problem is outside. And with the tobacco directive, the way it is now, we will not solve that problem. And that's a chance you should not miss. Use us, use the companies that are here to make a good regulation in the tobacco directive. And that's the chance you have to take. Because otherwise you will lose it in the end, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Elites.
Medicinal application. Of course, we have looked at it to make sure that we understand what's involved. That you have to meet tests of product quality, product safety, and product efficacy. The latter is completely and utterly impossible because we are not making any claims about what the product can do. There is one known claim, one known application that we are aware of in the UK. We believe that's been with the MHRA in the UK for 3 years. We believe that over £2 million has been spent on it, and somewhat ironically, that is a company owned by a tobacco business. So we've got a slightly perverse situation that there's only one business in the UK which is pursuing a medicinal route. That is a tobacco company. I will lead you to draw your own conclusions from that. Regulation, I can't stress how important it is for us. The biggest threat we face is unregulated product being sold in the back street somewhere and giving the whole product category a bad name. It is so important for us. And the other comments that were made, your question about new users, I think that Enjoy answered that one, but I would refer you to Action on Smoking in Health's January 2013 report. There is little evidence of use by those who have never smoked, and we obviously defer to the immense amount of knowledge that Ash have on tobacco control. All of the other questions that were raised, I think they all come to one key theme. We've gone out of our way to mimic the experience of a cigarette. And the question about flavourings, we have no interest in flavourings at all because those aren't, that's not a normal cigarette. So we do have a menthol flavour, but all of the other flavourings we think are completely inappropriate because those are not what cigarettes are like. The question of a measurable dosage, with respect, it doesn't make sense. No person who smokes a cigarette takes the same amount of nicotine out of it as somebody else. They have longer, shorter, more drags, inhalations. So it's a nonsense. Yes, a medicine can have measured or consistent dosages, but as I've said before, ours is not a medicine. And I think that's all of the points. There's one last point that was made about the cost. I think it's an important point. There is a very positive appeal to the poorer demographics in relation to e-cigs because they are cheaper. And of course, as I'm sure you're aware, the prevalence of smoking amongst the poorer demographics is higher. So I think that's an important point from a public health perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, Isita.
I think most of the things I want to cover have already been covered pretty well. One thing I would like to pick up on in particular is that our main concern with medicine regulation is that the products are very much intended to mimic the behaviour of a tobacco cigarette, where every smoker smokes in a slightly different way. And as Dr. Vaseline has pointed out, the delivery of nicotine from a cigarette can be varied hugely. So talking in terms of dosage is completely the wrong way to look at it. People who use nicotine self-titrate to the nicotine level they are comfortable with. So forcing them to have a dosage regime in a medicinal framework would actually change the product in a way that makes it less effective and less appealing to consumers. And obviously they're the ones who choose these products at the moment. That's why it's such a growth industry. And that's something that very much could potentially be destroyed by medicine regulation. The other one I'd like to pick up on is age control, which we would absolutely support. And we did discuss it with the Commission at our meeting. But they said that it couldn't be done except on the national level because the definition of what constitutes an adult age varies across the community. But certainly it is something I think that everyone here would support.
Yeah, I mean, it's about advertising as well. I mean, it's not part of this particular law on the age limits. Okay.
The other one, if I could
just
sneak in the last one, is that our proposal was for 5%, not 5 milligram, as was mentioned in one of the questions, because most users use upwards of 2.4%. So obviously setting the bar too low would exclude them.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the concerns was about the labelling, that some products on the market had no nicotine, and then, you're saying smokers want to reduce their cigarette consumption. If they use an e-cigarette that actually has no nicotine or is mislabelled and they can't get what they need from that product, they will not switch to that product. They will think this product is hopeless and useless unless they're properly regulated in some way. And that's what I'm taking away, because in a way I hear very clearly what you are saying about the medicines regulatory framework, but you also seem to be saying that the current framework isn't adequate either.
Well, our trade association was specifically intended to self-regulate, because from our perspective, the problem isn't that there's not enough regulation, it's that there's a shortfall of enforcement. The GPSD does require that products are checked for quality, but it's not being done. So from our perspective, it's a lack of enforcement, not a lack of regulation.
Yes, but, I mean, so who are you suggesting should do the enforcing?
Well, obviously we enforce for our members, but obviously we can't dictate to anybody else. So it is a little
companies
bit
should
of an
be
issue.
responsible for the products they put on the market.
Well, legally they are.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think we can shift that responsibility onto sort of, I don't know, trading standards officers in Britain and taxpayers, and companies must take responsibility for their products.
Absolutely.
And to make sure their supply chains actually put products on the market which meet standards. And, I mean, there seems to be an issue about controlling that supply chain from some of the things I've read and what you've been saying. Anyway, sorry, Martin.
One last point just occurs to me. I mean, if the medicines regulatory route is not the right way to regulate, and I'm not at all convinced that the Tobacco Products Directive is the right place to regulate these things either, is there not a case for an additional small piece of legislation to regulate them? But I agree that you have problems with the medical regulatory route. Tobacco products doesn't seem to cover it really either. I mean, your point that nicotine is derived from tobacco, I suppose, is valid, but I don't think anybody really believes that they are covered by the whole definition of tobacco and other things. But generally, so perhaps, Linda, the solution is a short, separate piece of legislation. We all agree, I think most people do, that they should be regulated. I mean, there needs to be some consistency about them. People need to know if they're advertised so many milligrams of nicotine, they should get it. Maybe the solution, rather than trying to make fit is to urge the Commission to have a separate piece of legislation regulating them.
Yeah, well, that's a discussion we'll have to have as shadow rapporteurs. I don't see that taking it out of here and putting it somewhere else resolves the problem. The problem is one of substance here and getting the right legislation. Just having... But we have to talk about that amongst ourselves.
Yeah, but effectively, the Commission are not saying it should be regulated in this directive, are they? They're saying we should stick it into medicines instead.
Final short comment.
I would like to comment something you said about the toxic substances, and I absolutely agree with you that they have found some toxic substances. I'm sure everyone knows that the air here could contain some levels of carbon monoxide, of nitrous oxides, which are below the levels of harm. So because the best information comes from numbers, I will tell you a published study in American Journal of Public Health that they found in 1 ml of liquid 8 nanograms of nitrosamines, which are toxic and carcinogenic substances. One nicotine gum, a pharmaceutical product, has 2 nanograms, and you can use 20 per day, 20 gums per day. One Nicorette patch has 8 nanograms of nitrosamines, and one tobacco cigarette has 9,000 nanograms of nitrosamines. You can find toxic substances everywhere, but the level is what is important, because it could be to a level which is lower. And something about Mr. Callahan that noted. I absolutely agree with you, but I'm not sure that it's feasible. There should be a separate category of tobacco harm reduction products, including not only electronic cigarettes, but also other products that have been proved to be effective, but the European Commission does not want the consumers to have it. I take, for example, smokeless tobacco, which again in this proposal is banned from use except from Sweden. If we could have a legislation separately for tobacco harm reduction products, that could be ideal for the electronic cigarette. Thank you very much.
That's a whole other debate about, because, you know, then we'll get some of you saying, well, actually, we're better than snus because actually we're not a tobacco product and therefore we don't cause oral mouth cancer. So we'll have a different debate. I'll let you make... I want to finish with 1 minute each, 2 of you then, 1 minute each, then we really have to stop because my colleagues have to go.
To answer your question about the regulatory structure and why the product should fall under the tobacco category is because in the U.S., obviously, it was defined as such because the definition for tobacco products clearly puts it there. In Europe, that's not always the case. So when you're trying to build a new structure, which has also been tried before, it becomes a very difficult process. As the doctor says right here, at the end of the day, we're trying to make this fit so that it becomes a product that is served worldwide and that individuals have the ability to purchase it with the right framework, age verification, which I pushed for really hard in the U.S. as well as here in Europe. But the process for age verification is not even being implemented here in Europe. Veritat, which is a big company in the States that does that, nobody here knows how to do that, and that's not implemented yet. Those issues are impossible to build up unless you're looking at the next 10, 15 years under the current structure with the way the EU works and with all the shortfalls and financial structures that we have. It's going to be a very long process, and that's the reason why you implement it under the tobacco category. It's instantaneously categorized and regulated as such. Thank you.
Obviously, we don't agree that the tobacco classification would be appropriate for the products because it would kill it dead in the water. Equally, I think, although I appreciate what you're trying to suggest, Mr. Callanan, it's very difficult to introduce new legislation for anything. And there is an opportunity here, I think, for the Parliament to work on the Commission directive proposal. Obviously, this is what you've got to do to be able to push it through anyway. And I think it just needs a very small adjustment. If we can just get to a more sensible level, everybody wins. And then we need to ensure that there is enforcement of the existing regulations, which has to happen anyway. Because whether it's a medicinal product, whether it's a tobacco product, whether it's a consumer product, there must be enforcement of the law. Otherwise, you just have cowboys running amok. So we must have enforcement. But if we can just tweak that level up to a more sensible level, then there wouldn't be an issue. And I don't think there would be any of these challenges, which others have suggested quite rightly would follow if it were misclassified at too low a level. But if you put it up to 5%, that's 50 milligrams per mil. That's a reasonable level that everybody could work with. Just a final really quick point on flavourings. Flavourings are very appealing to adults, particularly because when you move from smoking tobacco products onto using electronic cigarettes instead, you tend to get your taste buds back. And then you can enjoy these flavours and really appreciate them, and it doesn't actually make them any more appealing to children, hence the fact the data shows we're not seeing any uptake by non-smokers. Children don't find them cool, they find them very unattractive. If children are going to rebel, they're going to start smoking. They're not going to start using an electronic cigarette. Thank you very much.
Okay, can I thank you very much for coming this afternoon. We've listened to your comments and we will continue our deliberations. Thank you very much.
We have plenty of time.